before I even start this video, I want you to know that you are amazing, okay? You are still here on this planet. You are still stepping forward through challenges, through life. We've all had setbacks in our life, and I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for you being here on this earth, okay? Because it's not an easy place to be all the time. How do you love yourself when you don't even like yourself? How do you love yourself? Where do you even start? How do you do it? Right? I was just working with a client, a beautiful, amazing woman who doesn't know where to begin with self-love. Like, she doesn't even know what that means or what that looks like. And I wanted to make this video after our session because I think it's going to relate not just to her, but to many of us. So I thought I would share with you a personal story I've never shared before. It's going to be going in my memoir at some point when I publish that, but I thought I'd share it here with you first, and then also give you some powerful tools to use to begin your journey of self-love. And when I say self-love, I mean radical self-love. I mean an unconditional embrace of every single delicious part of you, every facet of you, the things you like, the things you don't like, okay? And we all have both. So in 2010, I was like many months into, probably about 9 months into being in the Redwoods. For those of you who don't know, I had a beautiful life in Los Angeles, the perfect life, so to speak. I was miserable inside, and so I left that life behind and went into solitude in the Redwoods to find myself. I was really desperate to heal and to find myself and to love myself, but I didn't even know where to begin. So I left everything behind and faced myself in the quiet of the Redwoods. And in that time, a lot came up. Let's just say a lot of my pain, everything I had been running from, all of my self-criticisms, which unbeknownst to me, I was basically hating myself for most of my life, and I wasn't even aware of it. There was just this voice in the back of my head for most of my life that was criticizing me, taking me down, constantly comparing me to others, trying to validate how and where I am not worthy or not good enough. And it was a very silent noise in the background of my head for most of my life. That was in 2009 where I started to discover this. And in 2010, it escalated. It got really bad. It got a lot worse, actually. And I'll never forget, I had cut all my hair off. I had gained about 15 pounds, and I'm a small frame, so that's a lot on my body. And all the things that I took pride in, what I thought were valuable about me, especially the way I looked, that's where I sourced a lot of my validity from at that time, was really going away, or at least I thought it was. And so that critical voice in the background of my mind got really loud. And I'll never forget, I was working the diamond process, even though I didn't know it was the diamond process back then. I was putting myself through this medicinal dialogue practice again and again every single day, which basically meant that I was giving a voice to my feelings, and I was letting whatever was coming up in my feelings to be expressed. And yes, I was talking to myself alone in the Redwoods for like 9 months at that point. And it's kind of like Gestalt, if you guys know therapy, very similar to Gestalt therapy. And I was doing this, facilitating myself through this because I had a master's in spiritual psychology. So I was basically my one and only client through that time. And in that period of time, I reached a climax, and I'll never forget, I was on the floor doing a dialogue, and I was dialoguing with this like evil is the only way I can describe it, part of me, like the most critical voice that you could ever imagine that was in my own head, and I was giving it a voice and I was dialoguing with it. And the way that I saw it was like this monster inside of my head that just wanted to destroy me, okay? So the total opposite of self-love. It was very destructive. And this voice inside of my head, as I was giving voice to it, it was just tearing me down, telling me how worthless I am and how I'm nobody, and I shouldn't even take up air because I'm not worthy of being alive. And it was very, very harsh, as you can imagine. And then you switch seats, and I was sitting in the seat of myself, and I was trying to work my positive language and trying to dialogue with this part of me, but it was really fabricated. And what I really wanted to say, I really just wanted to collapse because I didn't have anything to say in response that was honest, because my positivity and my light was really at its end. It was like the light inside of me was just like, just being extinguished. And I actually did collapse, and I gave up the dialogue that I was in and the inner work, and I just collapsed on the rug. I remember it was this gray rug, and I started bawling my eyes out on this rug. And there was this mirror close by, and I remember looking up at the mirror, and I saw my short hair and my puffier body, and all I could see was the ugliest face. And I'm sorry if this is too honest for some of you. You might want to click out of this video because this is a very, very raw and honest video. I'm just going to say it straight up because I know what I'm going to share is going to help some of you. If it at least helps one of you, I'm doing my job. But I remember looking in the mirror, and the reflection I saw back, all I could see was this very ugly face looking back at me. And I just felt worthless. And the only way I can describe the feeling is that in my belly, I felt vacant and empty, like nothing, like worthless. And I collapsed harder on the ground, and I just started crying so intensely. And that voice of that monster in my head started getting louder. And it was just like beating me down with all the reasons why I'm so unworthy, and how ugly I am, and how at least I used to be pretty and I used to have that value. Now I don't even have that. I should have married the guy I was with because no one's ever going to marry me. I'm never going to have a place in life. I'm just worthless. My life is never going to amount to anything. I should just be ashamed of myself. I mean, it went on and on and on and on. And as I cried and cried and cried with like the tears and the snot like mixing with the carpet, and my face was like practically glued to the carpet, and I really at that point I was praying for death, okay? I was praying to God because I didn't have the courage to take my own life. Thankfully, I guess now I see it as I had the smarts not to take my own life, because I know that doesn't resolve anything on a deep spiritual level. I now understand that. And know it in my bones. But I didn't have the courage, if you want to put it that way, to take my own life. I didn't have that button, that ability to do that inside of me. So I prayed to God to please, please, please. It was too painful to please take me out of this place, out of my life, eject me out. I don't want to be here anymore. And I pleaded. I begged. And I collapsed, and I kept crying, and I was crying, and I was crying. And it was this very strange experience where all of these images started shuffling through my brain. And I started seeing all of these memories, childhood memories. My dad driving up the driveway, and how I would run onto the hood of his car, and he would slowly, it was like a game we would play, and he would drive up the driveway with me on the hood, and I thought that was the most fun adventure. And then I saw an image of my best friend and I stuffing our bikini tops with sand. We were little girls and just playing and being silly. And then I saw my first prom date, and then I saw images of my bunny rabbit that I loved so much, and all these things that I loved, almost like photographs, like shuffling in, shuffling in, shuffling in, shuffling in. Real life events just playing themselves through my mind's eye. And the last thing I saw was an image of a little baby, a newborn, perfect baby on a marble floor, a cold, white marble floor with nothing around it, no furniture, no people, nothing, just alone and naked and cold on this marble floor. And this baby was perfect, precious, and alone. And I could feel the coldness of not being touched, not being safe, not being loved. And at the same time, I heard this voice, that critical voice of that monster in my head, just tearing me down, telling me why I'm so unworthy and all the ways I failed myself and others, and what a spoiled brat I am. And the horrible things in my head, like just all the self-criticisms and self-judgments. But for the first time, seeing that image of that baby, which I knew was myself, I knew it was a flicker of who I truly was inside of myself. Seeing that image coupled with the sound, suddenly that voice in my head, that critic in my head, it suddenly ignited another part of me up and out. That other part of me is what I refer to now as the true mother. But it was basically like this mother or this goddess or this powerful priestess came up through me and just roared through me and was no longer able to take that critical voice in my head, knowing that it was not hurting me, it was actually hitting that little innocent child. Okay, this is hard for me to articulate, so I'm doing my best here. But basically, in my mind's eye, I just imagined myself reaching my hand and grabbing that little infant and taking her off of that cold marble floor, clothing her with my own blanket that I actually had around me in that moment when I was bawling on the carpet. And I held myself shaking in tears for, I don't even know how much time went by. And I started to feel this connection with what people call the inner child, okay? This mother embracing the inner child. And I didn't connect the dots at the moment at that time, but what I realized is that was me, my inner essence, my innocence, brought into my consciousness, really being shown to me. And I share this because we all have this dimension inside of us, this pure, innocent, powerful, precious presence inside. I like to think of it as the personified I am presence. It's like the most perfect, innocent dimension of you and me. And as I embraced this part of me and I could hear that critical voice still going, there was suddenly this power that rose in me that was like, no more. I will never allow you to tell me who I am or take me down again. It just was no longer, it was like I had a baby and this mother power was like, I will, so you think of like a bear. If somebody tries to go into a bear's territory when it has a baby cub, bears are adorable and snuggly and cute. And if you cross their territory, especially when there's a cub around, that bear will just destroy you, right? That was the energy that rose up in me. And it was a part of me that I had never, ever experienced, that powerful, primal protectress. And I wrapped myself around that baby and I was breathing life into my true self, not the image I saw on the outside, not the girl that I was back then that I was trying to be, which was the popular, pretty, wealthy, healthy, all the perfect things that I thought I needed to be, dressed well, stylish. Not the image that I was taught to be, but the true image, that beautiful inner essence that I could suddenly touch who I was, who I am. And that was the start of my journey into self-love. That was the beginning of me connecting with who I really am. And that me was a baby, a teeny, like innocent, vulnerable dimension of me. And what I began to do from that point on was I started to walk through my life as if I had a child. And this child was my number one priority. And that was how I discovered how to actually love myself, because it was no longer about loving Veronica, this character, this like person, this woman in the world. It was actually, how would I love a little girl if I just had a baby? How would I love that baby girl? And I didn't know how, because I wasn't a mother and I had no idea how to love a child. But I learned through application. I learned through expressing, and being key foundation of self-love is authenticity. Being authentic about where I was. So I started to build, and I started to use the diamond process, the medicinal dialogue especially, to communicate with the inner child as her mother. So any time throughout my life at that point, and there's more to what happened in that period with that inner critic on that carpet that day, but I'll save that for the memoir. But what that intense hatred in my head, self-hatred, did for me is it cracked me open into self-love, at least the start of self-love. And it introduced me to my inner child. And I had done inner child work in the past, but I had never actually felt the vulnerability of that child and seen the vulnerability of that child. It just bloomed inside of me. It like got brought to the surface. It emerged. It was like a rebirth. It just emerged in me. And I believe that we all go through this at some point on our journey. For some of us, it's a health crisis. For some of us, everything shatters. For some of us, it's a death in the family. For some of us, our life as we know it ends. For some of us, it's many different things that happen at the same time, a crisis. For some of us, it's a fire that burns our house and our belongings and everything we know down, everything we own down. And we are introduced to who we really are. We are actually introduced to the pure, vulnerable, keyword, essence inside. And our culture teaches us that vulnerability is a bad thing. Vulnerability is a beautiful thing. Vulnerability is a doorway. It is a softness that allows you to reach into the truth of life. When we walk around with armor, we're walking around as a facade. My armor was polish. That was, I fought with polish. How polished can I be? How, beautiful could I look? How perfect could my body be? Things like that. How could I fit into this perfect image? That was my armor. That was my hardness. But when we are met with a crisis, we actually are given an opportunity to meet who we truly are if we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. So if you're watching this and asking, like, how do I love myself when I actually don't like myself? Or maybe like me, you actually, I did, hated myself. How do you love yourself through that? Because you can't actually fake it. You can't go from self-critical to self-celebration, right? It's not authentic. It's not honest. Well, first of all, let's take a moment, and if you could just take a deep breath with me. And let that breath reach your heart. And on your next inhalation, let that breath reach all the way back in time, the little girl or boy that you once were. And one more deep breath in, inhaling in, and letting that deep breath reach all the way back in time, like before you were even born, that seed that you were, that egg, okay? That fertilized egg, and exhale out. And just imagine that you are now responsible as a parent. You have just been given a child. You have just adopted a child. And that child is a baby, just born. And now you are responsible for this baby. So you are basically having to reparent this child. Take that child out of your parents' hands, because most of us, no matter how old we are still functioning in the belief and in the mindset and in the foundation of belief systems that our parents gave us, right? So, a lot of people feel guilt, for example, or like whatever the programs were that our parents taught us, that's oftentimes how we're parenting ourselves. So that critical voice in my head was actually learned from my environment, right? Learned from maybe somebody in my family who was a perfectionist, or somebody else who was mentally imbalanced, or somebody who was, no matter how loving and beautiful and amazing our parents are, they give us messages that they don't intend to, that can be very destructive. So it's really important to, as conscious beings on this path, the most powerful thing, the most powerful way to awaken into who we truly are is to go on the journey of self-love. And it begins by meeting ourselves with the same level of compassion and gentleness that we would meet a baby. So when you hear a lot of people talk about the inner child work, oftentimes people are like rolling their eyes like that is so ridiculous, like, ugh. And I get it. And I will also say that there is huge validity. I'll say that the shift that happened in my life, a big shift, was when I actually opened my arms to the child inside of me, or you can phrase it how you want, really the innocent, vulnerable, original dimension of me that is as pure as a baby. And it's easy to do this work when you actually personify it and see it as a baby. So I want you to imagine right now that you've been given a child. You have been given a baby right now, okay? And that child is your responsibility. So the first step is to actually create a space in your home. Put a picture of yourself up as a little girl or boy, as a child, and make space in your home physically for that dimension of you that is a child, that is vulnerable and innocent. And burps. And burps. I mean, think about it. You burp a baby, right? But me as an adult, I'm like, oh my God, I should be ashamed of myself. I just burped on my video. And that's the thing. That's what we're shifting here. Is that when a baby burps, it's so cute, right? Why is that not cute for you to do? Why is that suddenly different? Why do you have to meet some sort of expectation in order to be valuable? Why do you have to fit into some model of what a human should be in order to be loved? You don't. You actually don't. And you have that choice. But what that means is that you actually cut the cord from everyone and everything around you and what people are expecting of you. So it's like moving from even your parents, like cutting the umbilical cord. Really, what my therapist at the time when I was in Mendocino, Steve Seiler, I've made 2 videos with him, he's incredible. What he was teaching me was how to leave home. He's like, kid, you need to leave home. You're still stuck home even though you're 5,000 miles away, right? So we all need to at some point leave home. Otherwise, we're gonna be miserable for the rest of our lives trying to meet up to our parents' expectations, society's expectations, the government's expectations, our teachers, the guys or girls we liked in high school's expectations, without even realizing it. We're trying to get love by meeting a certain model, by meeting up to some sort of expectation that never, ever, ever satiates you. It will never give you the love that you seek. It will never give you the peace that you seek. It's why we compare ourselves to others. It's why we tear ourselves down, because the ego turns into a critic. Because all it's trying to do is get us love by beating us into a version of ourselves that we think is the version that will get us that love. But it never, ever does. It never does. And even if somebody loves us for being what they want us to be, we've betrayed ourselves and we hate ourselves for it. And this path is a radical path, and it is a beautiful, delicious path. Because it's about returning home to who you truly are. And so to answer the question, how do I love myself when I don't even like myself? Start with welcoming yourself as if you were just born into your home. So make space for the baby, the infant version of you, by creating a little altar or a space. Put a picture up of yourself as a baby, ideally, or a child, like before the age of 4 or 5 would be great. And it's like you're creating a room, and you're creating a literal room or a physical space for this innocent you to rebirth into life again as you, as their parent, mother or father. And then it's a whole journey of parenting yourself, reparenting yourself. So for me, what that looked like, and I actually spoke of this in a video called Reparenting the Inner Child. My therapist at the time had actually given me the instruction to welcome this child home and create a room for her. And so I went through a whole process I won't get into. You can watch that video somewhere, Reparenting the Inner Child. And I just would walk around, and anytime I got triggered or felt pain, I could now understand that it was the vulnerable part of me. It wasn't actually me. It was a dimension of me, the inner child, that was calling out for love and safety, to be pulled off of that marble floor and embraced, okay? So anytime you or me or anyone feels vulnerable or anxious or afraid, it's because the inner child feels alone, because our attention typically is so out of ourselves. We're either comparing ourselves or thinking about what we have to do for other people, maybe even our own children. So putting so many other people first that we forget ourselves. We leave ourselves, and it creates this anxiety in our bodies. And that critic will reign supreme because we're not giving ourselves the love we need. So it will do everything it can to beat us into a version of ourselves that other people will love, that we've been taught other people will love. But guess what? That just creates more anxiety and resentment to other people because they can never fulfill all of our needs. So it's like, I'm beating myself into this version to make myself perfect so you'll love me, but you're not giving me the love I need. You're not giving me everything I need. And the only way out of that codependency, the only way out of that trap, the only way out of that self-hatred or that self-criticism is to back up, cut cords, cut away from, basically leave home, as Steve Seiler would say, and come home to yourself. So create a space in your home. The very solid, practical way to do this, create a space in your home, even if it's just a little altar or table with a picture of your inner child, and then collect an object that child within you would love to create, would love. Like for me, it was a shell that I collected on the beach because I always loved the beach. To go on a date with yourself and imagine you're holding a baby. You're present with that baby, or you're with a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. And that child, anytime you feel triggered, it's the child inside. So you start to build a dialogue with that child inside, allowing him or her to express her feelings. And in that, you meet that child from a parent, from the true mother or true father's perspective, which is with authenticity and love. So the way I would do that is I would look at my little girl and say, and this is all in the Diamond Process book, you can use the Diamond Process to dialogue with the inner child, like really powerful to do it that way. But basically, let's say I got triggered one day because somebody looked me up and down in the grocery store when I was in Mendocino, and I felt worthless. And suddenly I had these judgments of being worthless or ugly or fat or stupid or whatever the critic in my head was telling me that day. And I would feel that pain. And usually what we do is we eat or we stuff it or we, go shopping or whatever our addictions are. We scroll. That's the big one these days. But that just stuffs that feeling, right? And it makes it worse. It just compounds. So instead, what I would do is I'd go home, I'd close my eyes, and I would do the Diamond Process. I would check in with that child inside and say, how are you feeling? And the child would probably say, I feel horrible. I feel worthless. I feel like nobody loves me, like nobody cares about me, like I don't belong here. And so what I would say, and the way I did this was super powerful, not with this journal, although someone just gave this to me and it's amazing. This is a calendar, but I took a journal, I don't have it in front of me, and it's filled and it's like this thick. And I did dialogues every single morning, especially once I moved back to LA, it saved me. And I would dialogue between me and the inner child. So my dialogues wouldn't be like, oh honey, it's okay, get over it, you'll be fine. As a true mother and authenticity as the baseline, I would say the truth. So I'd always speak the truth of the moment. I know it's hard. I'm so sorry. And I'm so sorry that I haven't been here for you. I'm sorry I've put everyone else first. I don't even know how to be a mom, but I promise you that I'm going to do my best. And I am here and I will show up again and again and again. And I can't promise you I'm going to be perfect, but I can promise you that I am going to show up and learn and listen and love you as best as I can. And I'm so sorry you're hurting right now. Okay, so I'd have these honest dialogues, and then I would sit and breathe and tune into the inner child and feel where do I feel that in my body, right? So this work can be so, so powerful. And this is like a really deep journey that I take clients on, usually over 6 months or through a year. It's what our diamond process coaches are trained to do as well, one of the things. And it's powerful work. So to answer your question, how do I love myself when I don't know where to start? This is a good place to start. Are you open to this week taking a picture of yourself as a kid and welcoming that part of you back into your life, welcoming that young version of you and stepping into reparenting yourself, and see where this journey takes you? Okay, start a journal and title it, I have a baby now, whatever it is, my inner child journal or my self-love journal. And give a voice to that inner child, and then swap and give a voice to the true parent. What would you want to say to this child? And start to love and nurture yourself as the true mother or father that you are. And what you will notice through time is that you start to identify with the presence that you are, the acceptance that you are, the compassion that you are, because you're applying it to the inner child. And as you do that, you become who you really are, rather than being lost in the identity of a broken little girl or boy in an adult's body, which is what most humans are. Okay? And that's the truth and the reality. So may you enjoy this journey if you choose to go on it. And know that if you don't love yourself right now, if you don't even like yourself right now, I hear you. And I totally know. I've been there too. And I want you to know that it is possible for you to not only love your life, but love yourself on a level that you can't even imagine right now. If you have the desire in your heart, then the possibility, the fulfillment of that desire is here for you in this life. May 2018 be your most beautiful year yet, and I send you all of my love. I'll see you in the next video, and I'll see you next year. Mwah.